For some years after 1997, it was theorized that there was an orchestrated criminal conspiracy surrounding the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. However, official investigations in both Britain and France found that Diana died in a manner consistent with media reports following the fatal car crash in Paris on August 31, 1997. In 1999, a French investigation concluded that Diana died as the result of an accident. The French investigator, Judge Hervé Stephan, concluded that the paparazzi were some distance from the Mercedes S280 when it crashed and were not responsible. After hearing evidence at the British inquest, a jury in 2008 returned a verdict of unlawful killing by driver Henri Paul and the paparazzi pursuing the car. The jury's verdict also stated, in addition, the death of the deceased was caused or contributed to by the fact that the deceased were not wearing a seat belt and by the fact that the Mercedes struck the pillar in the Alma Tunnel rather than colliding with something else. Prominent in disputing the official version of events have been the British newspaper Daily Express and Egyptian businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed, whose son, Dodi, was Diana's boyfriend at the time and also died with her in the crash. A special Metropolitan Police inquiry team was established in 2004, Operation Paget, headed by Commissioner John Stevens to investigate the various conspiracy theories which led up to the British inquest. This investigation looked into 175 conspiracy claims that had been made by Fayed. Fayed has persistently suggested what were found to be conspiracy theories at the inquest and has repeatedly claimed that his son and Diana were murdered. Henri Paul. Security service connections. Theorists have alleged that the driver of the Mercedes, acting head of Ritz Security Henri Paul, was in the pay of a national security service, though different versions of the allegation name the country of the security service alternately as Britain, France, or the United States. Evidence purported to support this arises mainly from money in his possession at the time of his death and his personal wealth. These allegations are covered in Chapter 4 of the Operation Paget Criminal Investigation Report. Mohammed Al-Fayed claims that Henri Paul was working for MI6 and that they set him up. The inquiry found no evidence Henri Paul was an agent for any security service. Blood samples. Another allegation concerns the reliability of blood tests carried out, which indicated Paul had been drinking before he took the controls of the car. The French investigators' conclusion that Paul was drunk was made on the basis of an analysis of blood samples, which were said to contain an alcohol level that, according to Jay's September 1997 report, was 3 times the French legal limit. This initial analysis was challenged by a British pathologist hired by Al-Fayed. In response, French authorities carried out a third test, this time using the more medically conclusive vitreous fluid from inside the eye, which confirmed the level of alcohol measured by blood and also showed Paul had been taking antidepressants. It has been claimed that the level of alcohol reported to have been found in Paul's blood was inconsistent with his sober demeanor, as captured on the CCTV of the Ritz that evening. Professor Robert Forrest, a forensic pathologist, said that an alcoholic like Paul, with a higher tolerance for alcohol, would be able to appear more sober than he actually was. The families of Dodi Fayed and Henri Paul did not accept the findings of the French investigation. It was disclosed in November 2006 that Lord Stevens had met with Paul's elderly parents telling them that their son was not drunk. Just prior to Stevens's appearance at the inquest, a source close to Stevens stated that this inconsistency could be explained as him being considerate and sensitive towards the elderly couple, an assessment Scott Baker suggested might be credible in his opening comments to the jury. Under cross-examination at the inquest in February 2008, Stevens denied deliberately misleading Paul's parents and said that the chauffeur's condition at the time of the crash did not match the police's definition of being drunk, which he said relied upon someone's physical responses. Stevens said that the available evidence suggested Paul had consumed only 2 alcoholic drinks, but this was not necessarily all that Paul had consumed, and that he was indeed under the influence of alcohol at the time of the crash. An expert cited in the report estimated that Paul had drunk the equivalent of 5 measures of Richard, his favorite licorice-flavored French apéritif, before driving. In the 2 French tox lab tests, Paul was found to have 12.8% carbon hemoglobin saturation, a combination of blood's iron-carrying pigment and carbon monoxide. A smoker normally has about 10%, so the result was not unusual. Paul had been smoking small cigars, cigarillos, in the hours before the crash. Another test, backed by the opponents of the official findings, showed Paul had 20.7% in his blood at the time of death. If accurate, the rate of dispersal of carbon monoxide from the bloodstream would have meant that Paul's blood had 40% saturation a few hours earlier, and he would scarcely have been able to function at all. On December 9, 2009, it was reported that DNA samples confirm the blood samples with high alcohol levels were indeed from the driver. This was established by a comparison with samples provided by Paul's parents, demonstrating that the blood tested was that of Henri Paul and that he had 3 times the French legal limit of alcohol in his blood. Tomlinson's allegation of MI6 involvement. Richard Tomlinson, a former MI6 officer who was dismissed from the intelligence services and later served 5 months in prison for breaching the Official Secrets Act 1989, claimed in a sworn statement to the French inquiry in May 1999 that Britain's MI6 had been involved in the crash, suggesting that the security service had documentation which would assist Judge Stephan in his inquiry. The previous August, he had been reported by the BBC to have claimed that Paul was working for the security services and that one of Diana's bodyguards, either Trevor Rees-Jones, now known as Trevor Rees, or Kes Wingfield, was a contact for British intelligence. Tomlinson alleged that MI6 was monitoring Diana before her death, had told Mohammed Al-Fayed that Paul was an MI6 agent, and that her death mirrored plans he saw in 1992 for the assassination of then-President of Serbia Slobodan Milosevic, using a strobe light to blind his chauffeur. On February 13, 2008, Tomlinson told the inquest that he may have misremembered and that he had no evidence that Paul was an MI6 agent, but he had said in the previous day's court session that Paul was supplying MI6 with information. Speaking by video link from France, Tomlinson conceded that, after the interval of 16 or 17 years, he could not remember specifically whether the document he had seen during 1992 had in fact proposed the use of a strobe light to cause a traffic accident as a means of assassinating Milosevic, although use of lights for this purpose had been covered in his MI6 training. The Operation Paget inquiry was given unprecedented access to the offices of both MI5 and MI6 to investigate Tomlinson's claims. It was later revealed that the mentioned memo was a proposal written in March 1993 to assassinate another Serbian figure if he gained power, not Milosevic. Furthermore, the plan didn't involve anything about using flashlights. The inquiry consulted the Crown Prosecution Service to see if a prosecution for conspiracy to murder was appropriate for the report's author, as it is against British government policy to carry out assassinations. A prosecution was not pursued, but the author was subjected to a disciplinary procedure by MI6. Further evidence discrediting Tomlinson's claims was found in drafts of a book he was writing about his time in MI6 before he was jailed in 1998 for breaching the Official Secrets Act. The draft, dating from 1996, referred to the memo and contained none of the detail about a staged car crash with flashlights in a tunnel. It was later told by an MI6 manager that they weren't keeping any file on the Princess and Dodi, and there wasn't any plan involving them. The inquiry concluded by dismissing Tomlinson's claims as an embellishment. It went on to comment that this embellishment was largely responsible for giving rise to the theories Diana was murdered. It also found limited evidence of surveillance of Diana, mainly arising from phone calls she made to her friend Lucia Flecha de Lima at the Brazilian embassy, and that there was nothing to suggest a concerted effort to bug her phone calls and no monitoring of her in Paris, as there was strong evidence the British authorities had no way of knowing she was in Paris at the time of the accident. Tomlinson was arrested by French authorities in July 2006 as part of their inquiry into the death of Diana. French police were also reported to have seized computer files and personal papers from his home in Caen. Relationship with Dodi Fayed. One of the main motives which has been advanced for alleged murder includes suggestions Diana was pregnant with Dodi Fayed's child and the couple were about to get engaged. The alleged dislike of the idea of a non-Christian within the British royal family meant such a relationship between the mother of the future king and a prominent Egyptian Muslim would not be tolerated. In Mohammed Al Fayed's view, which he repeated in court at the inquest in February 2008, Prince Philip, the Prince of Wales, Diana's sister Lady Sarah McCorquodale and numerous others were all involved in a plot to kill the princess and his son. Jeffrey Steinberg of the Executive Intelligence Review, a publication of the American Lyndon LaRouche movement, has also put forward theories that the Princess of Wales was murdered by the security services under the instructions of Prince Philip. An article in the Daily Telegraph in 1998 reporting the EIR conspiracy theories alleged earlier links between the EIR and Al Fayed, while Francis Ween reported the following year that Al Fayed's spokesman had advised journalists to contact Steinberg. Al Fayed made the assertion in television interviews that the couple were going to announce their engagement on the Monday after the accident, September 1, 1997. Operation Paget commented that an announcement of such magnitude from the Princess of Wales would have been a substantial media event of worldwide interest and would have required significant preparation. No evidence was found that any such preparation had been made. CCTV evidence shown at the inquest indicates that Dodi left Alberto Repassi Jewelers on the August 30 with nothing more than a catalogue. Repassi said in 2003 that the ring had been placed on Diana's finger in a Saint-Tropez hotel, and was being resized for future collection in Paris, but later admitted to writer Martin Gregory that he had received legal papers from Al Fayed, a client for more than 20 years. Al Fayed said the couple chose the ring in Monte Carlo, and Dodi had picked it up in Paris the day before he died after it had been altered. This statement of Al Fayed was contradicted by the statements of Claude Roulette, a shop assistant, and the CCTV foot gauge. A CCTV recording demonstrated that a ring had been selected by a Ritz hotel official. It was bought by Mohammed Al Fayed after the couple's death. A few hours before the accident, on the afternoon of August 30, Diana's journalist friend Richard Kay received a call on his mobile phone from Diana in which she asked about what was likely to appear in the following day's Sunday papers about her. During this call, she made no mention of any announcement she intended to make. More revealing was the statement given by Diana's eldest sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, who testified that in a phone conversation with Diana on Friday, August 29, Diana spoke about Dodi Fayed in a manner that gave her sister the impression the relationship was on stony ground. Statements from other friends and confidants Diana spoke to in the week before her death, including her butler Paul Burrell, her friend Lady Annabel Goldsmith, and her spiritual advisor Rita Rogers, were unanimous that she was firm about not wanting to get engaged or married to anyone at that point in her life. A week before she died, the princess had told Goldsmith, "I need marriage like a rash on my face." Diana's former private secretary, Patrick Jeffson, said to the BBC in reaction to the publication of the Operation Paget report in December 2006 that her facial expression in the CCTV footage of her at the Paris Ritz on her final evening with Dodi Fayed was one she would wear when she was disgruntled with a situation. However, CCTV images released on October 6 taken just minutes before their deaths, show a relaxed Diana and Dodi affectionately holding hands. An inquiry witness was Hasnet Khan, a Muslim heart surgeon of Pakistani origin based in London, who had a relationship with Diana for 2 years. Diana had explored the possibility of marriage with him. This had been met with no opposition from the royal family, and Prince Charles had given his blessing. Khan stated that he had received some racist hate mail from members of the public because of the relationship, but had no reason to take what was said in this hate mail seriously. He also stated that he felt the relationship was not opposed by the royal family or any other branch of the British government, including the security services. Paul Burrell stated that Diana was still not over her breakup with Khan at the time of her death. It was also pointed out that Dodi and Diana had only met just under 7 weeks before the accident, at Al-Faid's villa in Saint-Tropez on July 14, meaning there were only 47 days from their first meeting until the night of the accident. Of those days, their schedules permitted them to be together for an absolute maximum of 35 days. From analysis of Diana's actual movements, it is likely they had spent approximately 23 days together before the accident. John McNamara, a former senior detective at Scotland Yard, headed Al-Faid's own investigation for 5 years from 1997. Cross-examined at the inquest on February 14, he conceded that he had found no evidence of a criminal conspiracy to kill the princess, or that she was engaged or pregnant at the time of her death, apart from the claims Al-Faid had relayed to him. Pregnancy. In January 2004, the former coroner of the Queen's household, Dr. John Burton, said, in an interview with The Times, that he attended a post-mortem examination of the princess's body at Fulham Mortuary, where he personally examined her womb and found her not to be pregnant. In an effort to examine the assertions made by Al-Faid, Operation Paget had scientific tests carried out on pre-transfusion blood found in the footwell of the seat in the wrecked Mercedes the Princess of Wales occupied at the time of the accident. This blood was found to have no trace of the HCG hormone associated with pregnancy. The inquiry also extensively interviewed friends of Diana's who were in close contact with her in the weeks leading up to her death. The evidence obtained from these witnesses was of a very sensitive nature, and most of it was not included in Operation Paget's criminal investigation report. However, it was reported that friends said she was in her normal menstrual cycle and there was evidence she was using contraception. Al-Faid's persistence in asserting Diana was pregnant led him to get members of his staff to tell the media that on their final day together, Diana and his son had visited a villa he owned in Paris to choose a room for the baby. While the couple had indeed visited the villa, the circumstances of the visit were exaggerated to say it had lasted 2 hours and that it was in the presence of a prominent Italian interior designer. A security guard at the villa, Ruben Morel, felt uncomfortable lying about the matter and sold his story to the Sun, stating that the visit lasted just under 30 minutes and was not in the company of any interior designer. He provided stills from CCTV to prove this and said he had been in the presence of Diana and Dodi for the entirety of their visit, with there having been no conversation about them coming to live at the villa. He later resigned from Al-Faid's employment and initiated an employment tribunal for constructive dismissal after Al-Faid successfully sued him for breach of contract because of the CCTV images he supplied to the Sunday. Senior members of Al-Faid's staff made derogatory comments about Morel and Trevor Rees-Jones in their statements to Operation Paget. In 2004, a Channel 4 documentary, The Diana Conspiracy, claimed that the butler at the villa who, in a June 1998 interview with the ITV documentary Diana, Secrets Behind the Crash, claimed to have shown the couple around with their intent being to live there, was not even present at the villa on that day as he was on vacation. Al-Faid first claimed that the Princess of Wales was pregnant at the time of her death to the Daily Express in May 2001. If it is true, it is strange that he sat upon this important information for 3.5 years, Scott Baker said at the inquest. Absence of CCTV images. The absence of CCTV images showing the Mercedes's journey from the hotel to the crash site has been frequently cited as evidence of an organized conspiracy. According to the independent newspaper in 2006, there were more than 14 CCTV cameras in the Pont de El Alma underpass, though none recorded footage of the fatal collision. Judge Hervé Stephan was appointed as examining magistrate in this case on September 2, 1997. On that day, by judicial order, he tasked the Brigade Criminelle with identifying all video and photographic images along the route taken by the Mercedes. Lieutenant Eric Gigoux of the Brigade Criminelle led the team that carried out that work, initially by retracing the route several times and drawing up a list of possible locations. His report showed that the team identified 10 locations of CCTV cameras. None of these had any images relevant to the inquiry, since they were principally security cameras facing the entrances to buildings. Most of the cameras were not maintained by the city of Paris. The owners of the buildings to which they were attached operated them privately. There was a traffic monitoring camera above the underpass in the Place de El Alma itself, but this was under the control of La Compagnie de Circulation Urbaine de Paris, Paris Urban Traffic Unit. That department closed down at about 11 p.m., had no night duty staff and made no recordings. Officers in the police headquarters information and command center could continue to view the pictures shown by the traffic camera in real time but could not control it. There would be no reason for those in the overnight control room in Paris to be viewing that camera in particular before the crash. The subject of the CCTV cameras is dealt with in Chapter 5 of the Operation Paget report. It was also found that a photograph that was published in a book by David Cohen, Diana, Death of a Goddess, and captioned as having been taken just before the car entered the tunnel, was in fact taken by a photographer as the car left the back of the Paris Ritz. White Fiat Uno and James Andonson. Analysis of the wreckage of the Mercedes revealed it had glancing contact with a white Fiat Uno car, which left traces of paint on the Mercedes bodywork. Extensive attempts by the French police to find the vehicle involved were unsuccessful. Mohamed Al-Fayed alleged in his July 2005 statement to Operation Paget, and at other times, that the white Fiat Uno was being used by MI6 as a means of causing the Mercedes to swerve and thereby crash into the side of the tunnel. Al-Fayed further alleged that the Fiat Uno was owned by a French photojournalist named Jean-Paul James Andonson, a security services agent according to Fayed, who had photographed Diana while she was at his villa in Saint-Tropez in July 1997. Andonson's death in May 2000, Al-Fayed claimed, was either due to guilt over what he had done or because he was assassinated by the French or British security services to silence him. Operation Paget found that the white Fiat Uno Andonson owned was in an unroadworthy condition, being 9 years old at the time, with 325,000 kilometers on the odometer, suggesting that the car had been driven 27,000 miles per annum, and had not been maintained for several years prior. Andonson's neighbors confirmed the veracity of this evidence. Andonson had sold the car in October 1997. Operation Paget concluded it was extremely unlikely due to the car's condition and the fact Andonson had so openly disposed of it that it was the one at the scene of the accident in Paris. French police had examined Andonson's car as part of their effort to trace the one that had come into contact with the Mercedes with a view to prosecuting the driver for failing to render assistance, and had reached the same conclusion. The French police spent a year after the accident searching for the vehicle and eliminated over 4,000 white Fiat Unos from their inquiry. Operation Paget decided it would be unlikely renewed inquiries would identify the vehicle involved, as such a long period had elapsed since the accident. It concluded the threat of prosecution for a custodial offense probably deterred the driver from coming forward at the time. A retired major in the French Brigade Criminelle, Jean-Claude Mules, gave evidence to the inquest in February 2008. Andonson had been interviewed by French police in February 1998, and had been able to provide documentary evidence about his movements on the previous 30 and August 31, which had satisfied them that he could not have been the driver of the Fiat Uno involved. These demonstrated that Andonson could only have been at his home in Lignières, 177 miles from Paris, at the time of the crash. Elizabeth, his widow, said at the London inquest in February 2008 that her husband had been at home in bed with her at the time of the accident. Andonson's suicide. Andonson died in May 2000. The official verdict was suicide. His body was found in a black, burnt-out BMW in a forest near the town of Nantes, near Millau, in the south of France. Andonson's death was attributed to problems in his private life, and evidence was uncovered from his friends and associates that he had talked of suicide long before the accident. The Paget report states that when the car was found, Andonson's body was in the driver's seat of the car, and his head was detached and lay between the front seats. There was a hole in his left temple. The French pathologist concluded this hole was caused by the intense heat of the fire rather than, for example, a bullet wound. Operation Paget found no evidence Andonson was known to any security service and, contrary to Alfade's claims, his death was thoroughly investigated by French police, although the whereabouts of the car keys has never been explained. A break-in at his former workplace in June 2000 alleged to have been carried out by security services was found to be unconnected to his death, as no items related to him were stolen. The break-in was investigated by French police who have not found the criminals responsible. Nevertheless, Andonson's widow Elizabeth and their son James have rejected the idea that Andonson's death was suicide. The family have pressed French officials to conduct a murder investigation into Andonson's death 400 miles from his home, noting that he was in high spirits over his new job with the SIPA agency. Bright flash. An alternative explanation for the cause of the crash has been reports of a bright white flash just before the car entered the tunnel, blinding the driver. Richard Tomlinson made this allegation at the inquiry, but the veracity of his evidence was found wanting. It was found by the authorities that 3 eyewitnesses at the scene of the crash claimed to see a bright flash of light before the accident. François Lévi-Strette, originally François Lévi, made a clear, specific claim that he saw a bright flash, but his 3 statements to the authorities were in conflict with each other. Both the French detectives investigating after the crash and later the officers who worked on Operation Paget rejected his evidence. With the Mercedes behind him, he claimed to have seen the flash in his rearview mirror and recounted other elements of what he saw while he was negotiating the difficult bend out of the tunnel. Crucially, however, his testimony was directly contradicted by his then-wife, who was in the passenger seat next to him. However, eyewitness Brian Anderson, an American tourist, told detectives that he too saw a bright flash. French police in 1997 were aware of Lévi-Strette's conviction in Rouen during 1989 for dishonesty and his subsequent prison sentence, and he was not thought by them to be a reliable witness. Television documentaries produced by Channel 4 in 2004 and the BBC in 2006 both raised this issue. He appeared as a witness at the British inquiry via a video link in October 2007. Diana, Secrets Behind the Crash, June 3, 1998, an ITV program presented by Nicholas Owen, then ITN's royal correspondent, gave enough weight to the claims of Lévi-Strette that 93% of viewers polled by the Mirror newspaper just after the broadcast believed there had been a bright flash of light at the time of the crash. The detail of eyewitness testimony was thoroughly reviewed and Operation Paget officers succeeded in uncovering 2 new witnesses. Other eyewitness testimony made little reference to the appearance of any inexplicable flashes at the crash site. Several witnesses who would be expected to have seen a blinding flash made no reference to one. In any event, the detailed crash reconstruction revealed that the chain of events that led to the car unavoidably colliding with the pillar started well before it was at the mouth of the tunnel where the flash is alleged to have occurred. Furthermore, a strobe light of the type that was alleged to have been used is so powerful that a flash emitted from it would have been bright enough to illuminate a very wide area. It would have likely blinded not only Paul, but also the driver of the white Fiat Uno, the pursuing paparazzi and witnesses standing at the roadside. The Operation Paget report concluded that the alleged flash did not happen. Seat belt. There was some media discussion in April 2006 suggesting that Diana was a faithful seat belt user and therefore the fact that both her and Doty's seat belts either failed or were not used was sinister and might suggest sabotage. Other sources question if she did in fact use her seat belt all the time, as was suggested. What is certain is that she was not wearing a seat belt and this made things worse. We would like to think that if she had been wearing a seat belt, we'd have been able to save her, said Professor André Lienhart, who reviewed the emergency services response for the French government investigation of the incident. CNN did an analysis of the crash in early September 1997 and concluded that injuries would have been minor had the occupants been wearing seat belts. The conclusions were provisional owing to limited data about the specific Mercedes model as the limousine was not sold in the U.S. Analysis of the wreckage of the car after its repatriation to England in 2005 by a forensic accident investigator from the Transport Research Laboratory of 35 years' experience on behalf of Operation Paget found that all the seat belts were in good working order except for the right rear one which was attached to the seat Diana occupied. Follow-up inquiries with French investigators found that they had declared all the seat belts operational at an examination in October 1998, suggesting the damage to the seat belt took place after the accident. The British inquest verdict explicitly stated that lack of seat belts had caused or contributed to the deaths of both Doty and Diana. Transport to the hospital. The first call to the emergency services switchboard was logged at 12:26 a.m. The SAMU ambulance carrying the princess arrived at the Pitti Salpêtrière hospital at 2:06 a.m. This length of time has prompted much conspiracy-related comment. The period between the crash and the arrival at the hospital needs to take into account the following: the time taken for emergency services to arrive, the time taken by the sapeurs-pompiers, fire service, of Paris to remove Diana from the damaged car, and the actual journey time from the crash site to the hospital. Police officers Sébastien Dorzy and Lino Gagliadorn were the first emergency officials to arrive at the scene at around 12:30 a.m. Sergeants Xavier Gourmelin and Philippe Boyer of the sapeurs-pompiers arrived at around 12:32 a.m. Dr. Jean-Marc Martineau, a specialist in anesthetics and intensive care treatment and the doctor in charge of the SAMU ambulance, arrived at around 12:40 a.m. Diana was removed from the car at 1 a.m. She then went into cardiac arrest. Following external cardiopulmonary resuscitation, her heart started beating again. She was moved to the SAMU ambulance at 1:18 a.m. The ambulance departed the crash scene at 1:41 a.m. and arrived at the hospital at 2:06 a.m. a journey time of approximately 26 minutes. This included a stop at the Gare d'Austerlitz ordered by Dr. Martineau because of the drop in the blood pressure of the Princess of Wales and the necessity.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.